The Many Times Peter Parker Shocked Midtown by WreckItRiley. Chapter 1. The Confrontation. At Midtown Science and Tech, Peter Parker was an enigma. He talked constantly, but he never seemed to say anything about himself. Everyone knew the junior was a genius, and not a run-of-the-mill one either, but the kind that would change the world. Kids in all of his science classes, physics, chemistry, engineering and robotics, were well aware that the teachers never bothered to give him normal classwork. Instead, Parker was working on college-level material. It was rumoured that his chemistry teacher had even asked Parker to help put together the exams at the end of last year. As far as English and history went, Parker was top of the class. There was no doubt in anyone's mind who would be valedictorian, and the whole school knew he would be going to MIT. Yet Parker never boasted or gloated about his intelligence, never sung his own praises or drew attention to the fact that he was by far the smartest student in the school. In fact, he seemed to be embarrassed by attention, blushing whenever praised and deflecting whenever someone tried to compliment him. He was quiet, unassuming and modest. He was also bullied relentlessly, a fact the entire school was aware of, including the teachers. The only reason it was never stopped was because of who was doing the bullying. Flash Thompson was an egotistical, self-centered arsehole, but he had a father who donated to the school generously and a mother who was on the school board, making him untouchable. Fellow students avoided intervening in fear of inciting Flash's wrath on themselves, and the teachers did what they could without risking their jobs. The only thing that made the bullying slightly bearable was Parker's reaction to it. The shy genius always seemed to brush it off, never allowing Flash's taunts to get to him. He took the punishment like a champ, always shrugging and walking away, with a smile as if whatever was said, no matter how bad, hadn't affected him. He didn't know it, but Peter had garnered respect from the entire school for how he handled Flash. His innate ability to be the bigger person and walk away was legendary. That in itself was enough for people to start wondering who the hell was Peter Parker. Who was this kid that was smart enough to give most teachers a run for their money? The kid that showed humility in his success and wisdom in his failure? The kid that could listen to Flash taunt him about his life and never get angry or lash out? Everyone in the school wondered. They knew he was on the less wealthy side of things, going by his scholarship and hand-me-down clothes. Other than that, though Peter never seemed to talk about his home life, never mentioned family or what was going on with him. To be fair, the only people he ever really talked to about anything other than schoolwork was Ned Leeds and Michelle Jones. Nobody knew anything about Peter Parker, and that just made them more curious, especially considering his attitude. Peter was always smiling, always willing to help. He tutored many of his classmates in several subjects. All of them said he was incredible at it, never losing his temper or getting frustrated, but explaining things easily and giving out praise without hesitation. He remembered people's names and took time to ask how they were going, seeming to know if anyone needed encouragement or just to talk. The kid was selfless, absolutely kind in everything he did, never asking for anything in return. Peter was shy and kind and sweet. He blushed easily and gave all of himself to others. In truth, most of his fellow students worried about him. He was just too good in all ways, and nobody knew why. Until they did. It was a Thursday when the confrontation happened. That's what everyone was calling it, at least. Peter was at his locker talking quietly with his best friend Ned. Most assumed it was about Lego or Star Wars or some other frivolous thing that the two could often be heard discussing. Until Flash interjected, having overheard them. "Going to the hospital, Parker? What, are your parents finally having you tested?" The students who heard flinched, hating the abuse, but powerless to do anything about it. Everyone assumed Peter would behave as he always did, brush it off and walk away unaffected. Nobody was prepared for how the two friends reacted. Ned stood straight and put himself between Parker and Flash. Peter, he just stood in silence for a few seconds before he spoke in a voice so low only those closest could hear. "Not today, Flash. I can't today." The entire hallway froze, because even if they didn't hear the words, that tone had never come out of Peter's mouth before. Lifeless, devoid of emotion, and completely wrecked. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. The tension in Peter radiated into the air and spread like a plague, saturating everything until the heaviness was palpable and it became difficult to breathe. Every student in the hall waited and hoped that just once Flash would leave it alone, because whatever Peter was going through was not something that needed poking from a high school bully. But their prayers went unanswered as Flash seemed to take Peter's response as an invitation. "What's wrong, Penis, huh? Mommy and Daddy don't love you. They're getting tired of all your shit and now you're all sad." Flash's voice was loud enough to be heard through the entire hall, and everyone watched as Peter's shoulders tensed. Most were hoping that Parker would finally take a swing at Flash. What they didn't expect was for Peter to laugh. It was loud and mocking and completely mirthless. It grated on everyone's ears. And then Peter spoke. "Flash, we've been going to school together for years, and you still don't know?" Peter chuckled darkly before he turned and faced his bully with a blank stare. "Know what?" Flash asked, still cocky, if slightly off balance at Peter's behaviour. Peter just stared expressionless before responding. "My parents died in a plane crash when I was 6. It was silent as everyone took in that information, that Peter Parker, the kind, sweet genius, was an orphan, that he had lost what no child should at such an age, that this boy, who was everything good, had known so much bad. Flash's face went through confusion before settling on a smirk. "You're lying. Your dad was here freshman year for a science fair." The students in the hall hoped it was true, hoped that Peter had simply blurted that out to catch Flash off guard. But if there was one thing the student body knew, it was that Peter Parker did not lie. Peter simply shook his head as Ned put a comforting hand on his shoulder. "That was my Uncle Ben. He was killed late last year in a mugging." Peter looked Flash in the eye, and the kids closest would swear his eyes were on fire as he spoke next. "You want to know why I'm going to the hospital? My aunt, the only family I have left, has stage 3 cancer. I have lost so many people, Flash. My entire family is gone. My parents left when I was 6 and never came back. My uncle bled out in my arms after he was shot, and I have to go into my aunt's room every day as she wastes away." Peter was talking as if the floodgates were open, as if now he started he couldn't stop. "And the worst part is, there is nothing I can do. Nothing anybody can do. Iron Man can't save her. Spider-Man can't save her. All that is left is me watching her die slowly and painfully. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" Peter has stepped into Flash's space now and is staring his bully down with pain and heartbreak in his eyes. You could hear a pin drop in the absolute silence that has overtaken the entire school. There were tears in the eyes of several people in earshot. Then there was Peter, standing with hell in his eyes as he looked at his tormentor. Yet when he opened his mouth, his voice was quiet and soft. "You think you're better than me, but you're not. You're just lucky. You have parents that love you and enough money to never have to worry about choosing between rent and food. Go home, Flash. Tell your parents that you love them, because you never know when their last day is gonna come. I don't know what my last words to my parents were. I was too young to remember. And my uncle..." Peter looked down and shook his head before continuing. "I had a fight with him before he died. My last words to him were cruel. Don't make that mistake, Flash. Don't be like me." Flash stared at Peter dumbstruck, his face blank before he spoke. "But you're always so..." He looked at Peter again with a curious expression. "Always what, Flash?" Peter sighed heavily. Happy, Flash stated into the silence. And to be fair, the entire hall was thinking it. How was this kid that had been through and was still going through so much always smiling? You want to know why? Peter looked at Flash as he nodded, and Parker's face hardened as he spoke with a wisdom in his voice that no one his age should know. Because the world's a shitty place, full of cruelty and hatred, and I refuse to contribute to that. I refuse to make this world any worse than it already is. With that said, Ned gently put an arm around Peter and pulled him towards the exit. No one else in the hall moved for another 5 minutes as they mulled over what had been revealed. And if those who had heard hugged their parents tighter that night, well, nobody needed to know it. Thank you for listening. I really hope you enjoyed. Have a lovely day.